Danny, welcome.
Thank you.
You've been inhabiting my living room rather a lot recently. Only the other day, I came across the BBC4 Fly on the Wall documentary about the making of Annabel Arden's staging of Rossini's Barber at Glyndebourne, and also, like many people,
great.
I've been rewatching the now classic David McVicar rendition of Handel's Giulio Cesare in 2005, which was the first time I ever set eyes and ears upon you. And, as soon as you came on stage, I said to myself, boy, that lady belongs on a stage. I remember it very, very well. I mean, was the feeling behind the footlights just as strong as it was out front, that this was a special production?
Yeah, it really was. And actually, it was even in the rehearsals. And that's what I remember really distinguished that production from other shows that I've done. Although I've been very lucky to have been in, many, many new productions of things that have been successful. But Julius Caesar, when we started the rehearsals, we just we knew, we could feel that we were all going to be a part of something that was going to be different and something that people had never seen, and something that would push the envelope a little bit, in terms of how active a show could be, how physically engaged a show could be. I remember going to the first rehearsal, and because I wasn't scheduled to be the original Cleopatra. But,
were you not? Oh, that's interesting.
No, the lady who was going to play Cleopatra got ill and had to withdraw, and I was asked whether, instead of coming for Adela in Die Fledermaus in 2006, whether I'd come a year early and do Cleopatra. And I was singing Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream in Chicago at the Chicago Opera Theater with Brian Dickey, and I came 5 days late to the rehearsals, and I remember meeting Sir David McVicar, and he saying to me, well, it's wonderful that you're here. We're really thrilled that you could do this. And okay, let's get up there. And about 1 minute later, they were going 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, and kickball change, and da da da. And it was they had planned to choreograph the first aria and the last aria, and everything in between. They left open, which is a wonderful gift of a new production, is that it is a blank slate. And,
sure.
Of course. What ended up happening was that, they blocked out a 3-hour rehearsal for the opening number, and within 1 hour I had picked up the choreography, and so David sort of, I guess you could see the wheels turning, and he was going, okay, and I remember him saying, right, we're going to have a break, and Andrew, I've come up with an idea for the next aria. We're going to do like a brolly thing, and go away and make up the introduction to, that's Andrew George, the choreographer, and he said, and we'll make up the rest on the spot, and it just took off from there.
It's such an amazing story, and the fact that you came in and into a hot show in the way you did, that was pretty well kept secret, because I had no idea that you were not the original casting.
Yeah, no.
He lucked out there, I tell you.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, is we all felt like that. And all of my colleagues, if you look at the people who were cast in the original show, I mean, the artistry and the craftsmanship that each of those artists brought to the show, both physically as actors and vocally as singers, was just, second to none. And everybody started coming to the rehearsals, so other colleagues from other shows were popping in to see, what this buzz was about. And this is what we felt. This buzz just started going, like electric shocks.
I did one of these with Sarah the other day, Sarah Connolly.
Yes.
And she was saying exactly the same thing, that, there was the buzz from the show was kind of radiating out from the rehearsal room to
It
other
was.
parts of Glyndebourne. I loved the way that David tapped into Cleopatra's star quality. I mean, that was the way that the numbers, the arias were choreographed was extraordinary. And of course, he had someone that, when I said, that lady belongs on a stage, I've been there myself in the past. I was an actor briefly, and I just, I can spot it straight away. When someone is a stage animal, do you know what I mean? So
Sure.
that part of that production was extraordinary. What is it you particularly want from a director, Danny? Because I mean, David and I have talked a lot about this, and I love to hear it from the performer's point of view as well.
Well, David is a very rare being in that I feel like he almost sits in a league of his own in terms of his skill as a director and what he can do with all different levels of experience with acting, because not every singer comes to the rehearsal room with, let's say, the same skill set when it comes to acting. They do when it comes to singing, because you don't get to make it in the upper world if you can't sing. So you have, that's the starting prerequisite is, if you've made it up to a certain level, you can sing. That's established. And so it's all the other things that contribute to what you bring into the room in addition to that incredible voice. And David can do, he can really work miracles, and it's about understanding the language with which to communicate to each and every person, which is a different language. Not everybody can be instructed in the same way.
Yes.
And really great directors know, and conductors, it's exactly the same. They can speak the singer's language. They find the commonality. They find the language that the singer can understand, and not everybody processes information in the same way. And I've seen that happen many, many times, both with conductors and with directors, and it's magical to watch. I mean, what I love about a rapport with the director is I love to be pushed, and I like to be challenged. And I love to be able to try things out. So for there to be a safe environment where you can fail at something.
Yes.
So I don't want to go into a rehearsal room and feel like I'm on audition. And that happens a lot to singers. You feel all eyes are watching you. If you mess up a note or something, you think, oh, somebody's behind the table is going, oh, well, that didn't go rather well, did it? And it's a sad reality about the world that we live in, but that's a part of, I guess, human nature as well, is to judge. And the ideal situation for me is if you can sort of break through that first layer, that first barrier that makes you conscious about how you're being perceived, and actually.
The phrase you use there, Danny, a safe environment, I think is an important one, because if you don't feel safe and secure in the rehearsal room, you're not going to be able to take those risks, as you say, fail and fail better, if you see.
Yeah, absolutely. I need to do that. I need to be able to try things out as a performer, and it's absolutely fine for me if the director goes, "That was absolutely crap. Can you go back and do that again?" And if I can get to that stage where there's huge trust, because there's huge respect between everybody, then it gets really fun, because then people can really experiment, and you give more of yourself if you know that the people whom you're giving to trust, respect, admire you, and are not going to judge you by the worst version of what you put forth on that day.
Sure, I absolutely understand that. Yeah. I'm interested, Danny, in your upbringing in Melbourne, Australia, because it sounds like you excelled even as a child, across a wide spectrum of musical genres. I'm curious to know what was the soundtrack to your childhood? What music did you grow up listening to? Because I gather you auditioned for Les Miserables when it came to Australia, for the young Cosette, which is
I did.
That's wonderful.
I got down to the final two, and when I didn't get the part, I remember crying my eyes out.
Yeah. Who was the brat that got it?
Well, she was much older than me because I was only 7 or 8, and I remember whoever got it was something, what seemed very old to me, but probably 12 or 13. But there's a big difference between 7 and 8, so 12 and 13. But now, the soundtrack of my young years was a mixture of influences because my parents loved different music. So there was classical music, but there was also folk music, like Peter, Paul and Mary or Simon and Garfunkel. And then there was also things like ABBA or Dire Straits. So, there was a real mix of influences, so from Bach and choral music and Mozart to singing, Mamma Mia, in the car. And in a way that has reflected itself, I think, in my interests, because even at 5 and 6, I was doing song and dance, but then, I had this incredible stroke of luck, being born to the parents that I got, because they saw that the teachers who were teaching me in the singing and the dancing classes were, definitely coming out to them at the end of the lessons and saying, well, this girl is very unusually talented for her age, and wanting to put me in some of the adult dance classes to keep, stimulating I don't know why they put me in the adult classes. They just thought I was good enough for the adult classes, actually, I guess. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't really take in the sort of reasonings behind these things, but my parents thought, well, everybody's saying that she can do anything, so we don't want her to be pulled from pillar to post. At least if she's going to try her hand at all these things, she should have some training, some proper training, so she gets a vocal technique. Now, I was very, very young. I was 8 years old, and it was very difficult for my mom to find a teacher who would take me on. And most people said, well, she's way too young. She should just wait.
Yeah.
But she found a teacher with the Victorian State Opera in Australia who would teach me. So at 8, I started to sing the Vakai exercises in the Viardot scales, and I was singing Bach and Haydn and things that felt very organic to me. And at 8, I wasn't probably able to articulate it in the way that I can now, but what I knew back then was that I knew that all of my friends in the talent school could sing and dance and act, but I thought, well, none of them are taking these lessons and none of them can sing in this other way that I can sing, and it felt very natural to me and very organic, and I felt very able to do it, so I didn't struggle in the lessons.
Yes.
And that for me sort of clicked something in my mind that gave me a fixation with classical music. So it kind of made me go, well, I can do all of these other things, but what I really want to do is be an opera singer who can do all these other things.
Yeah, you see, the foundation of the voice, a legit foundation for a voice is so critical. I wish there weren't these divisions between different modes of music theatre. It's a big hobby horse of mine, Danny. I mean, it's all a question of style, isn't it? And it's about connecting with the vernacular of that particular style. Did you ever find yourself? I mean, obviously you trained your legit voice, but were you able to mix your voice in a different way so that you could sing show tunes in a convincing way, or did you never push that far?
No, I absolutely was able to do that, and in fact, one of the things that I find, I find it, I guess, interesting is that in my particular case, because I was doing pop music and musical theater and classical music at the same time, I grew 3 different sounds, if you will. all three feel very organic to me. They, as I've learned in my technique, they use different forms of registration. I register my chest voice in a different way.
Yeah.
And my mix voice, if I'm singing musical theater, I'll take my mix voice maybe a little bit higher than I normally would if I was singing classical music. But essentially, the sound is different versus, let's say, if you would hear an opera singer who's only ever known a classical way of producing their sound, that then takes up singing, Somewhere Over the Rainbow or whatever it is, and you can clearly hear that they're an opera singer making a rendition of it, because there's only one style in which they can sing.
Yes, I hear you.
Even if it's beautiful, even if it's musical, and all of that. So I've been very lucky to be able to flip back and forth between, sounding like a musical theater singer. Although I will say, when I did Man of La Mancha on the West End, so many of my colleagues in the show, they kept saying to me, they just don't train people to sing the way that you sing musical theater anymore. Like, they just don't do that anymore. They don't teach us that in school. And they were always quizzing me about how I go up and how I flow things, and it was very interesting to talk with them about it, and I enjoyed doing the musical theater warm-ups because they were so different as well.
Well, I was coming to that amazing double you did last summer. Before all the madness descended. You did Massenet Cendrillon at Glyndebourne, conducted by my mate John Wilson, and as you say, Man of La Mancha at the Coliseum. I didn't catch one of your performances, sadly, Danny, because the performance they sent me to, the alternate was on.
Oh,
You're still there.
Although she's wonderful too. I thought you were going to say that it was the performance that where the fire alarm went off.
No,
everybody was evacuated.
It was just one of those. They for some reason, between my schedule and theirs, they couldn't get me into one of your performances. And I think you're a born Aldonza, because it does require, even though it's a musical theatre role, it does require an operatic delivery.
Yeah, it needs to have an extension, as it were, that sort of that doesn't. It is, for me, it doesn't need to sound operatic, but it's got to be strong. It's got to feel confident and not get into sort of like squeaky, tweaky land. Yeah, no, it's that middle voice in that role. I mean, she's a piece of work, and it really needs to register in a big theatre like the Coliseum, even if it's mic'd. I once asked Dawn Upshaw, who'd done quite a lot of many years ago, when she started making Rodgers and Hart albums and, switching between genres, what she did technically, what adjustments she needed to make. And it's very interesting. She said something quite similar to you. She said, it's a question of just altering the center of gravity of the voice. Yeah. She said, but mostly for her, it's about connecting with the vernacular of the text and understanding that style. Absolutely. It's a funny thing, because I remember thinking when people were asking me how I was managing to go, rehearse all day and then go up and sing a whole musical at night and then get back to Glyndebourne at 1 o'clock in the morning and sort of rinse and repeat. I always found myself saying to them, the musical theater bit is a doddle. That's what I kept saying, because why did I say that? Because it's the same energy that I put into a show for musical theater that I would into opera, but in terms of the engagement of your whole apparatus when it comes to classical music, because you don't have the mic, you must project with the right amount of support at all times.
Yeah.
There's no room for any error. And you cannot sing classical music and go, well, I'll take it easy just for this show.
Yeah.
So And that's not to say that in musical theater you can, and that's not to say that in musical theater you don't have to support, because you do. And I remember doing it every night. But I guess I guess it feels like in classical music there's just very, very tiny, tiny margin for error.
Well, it's interesting you
There's
say that because
yeah.
I've spoken to one or two ladies who've sung Elphaba in Wicked, the
Mm.
Stephen Schwartz musical, which is inhuman in
Yes.
terms of, what is required of that one singer during the show. And I know for a fact that they have a vocal coach on hand uh, who finds ways of them saving themselves at certain parts of the role so that they can deliver the nodal moments, the big moments. It's kind of, and as you say, it's something you cannot do if you're singing acoustically, because you need that delivery, that support and projection at all times. You cannot coast a phrase. So there is a subtle difference, even though you only get out of a microphone what you put into it.
Yes,
And
and
that's
I
a
couldn't agree
fact.
more with that. Yeah, so it's a funny way to put it, but yes, there is something about the acoustic nature of classical singing that means that it just makes it more tiring because you are using your technique to project across naturally rather than through a mic.
Well, at Glyndebourne at the moment, I mean, you've been using the gardens rather more than usual during this dreadful summer, COVID summer, and offering punters an extra bit of fizz, if you like, with some Offenbach, his In the
Yes.
Market for Love, early operetta. Now, Offenbach was a crucial figure in the birth of the musical, if you like, I suppose, because he, along with Gilbert and Sullivan and Viennese operetta composers, were the foundation, I guess, of this whole beast called the musical. But some people think Offenbach was the really crucial figure. And of course, he had this wonderful facility for earworm tunes, and for just a lot of fun on stage, but also quite pithy in a way. I mean, have you explored his output a bit before doing this? I mean, who came across this piece?
Stephen Langridge
Yeah.
came across this piece. So all credit goes to him in terms of finding this little jewel of a piece that nobody knows, which I hope will get some traction on the map, because it's a wonderful piece to do and it's a great ensemble piece. So it'd be really good to do, for example, in conservatories. This is the perfect piece to put on because you have lots of parts, lots of showcases for talent in all the roles. Um, yeah, I love Offenbach, and I don't do it enough, and everybody wants me to do it. I've been told for years and years and years that I should like single-handedly revive the Offenbach thing, and I'm always going, well, it's not always up to me, but it's a hard thing to get operetta into opera houses. It's not something. I mean, I was having a talk with someone just a couple of days ago, and they said it's really difficult to get Offenbach programmed. Um, and I don't know why that is.
It's a
I think that,
shame because, the only one of his pieces, Tales of Hoffmann, is the only one that finds its way into opera houses. But it's a
yeah.
shame because when I talked about divisions between different kinds of music theatre, the fact that in Vienna there is the popular house, the operetta house, and the state opera, there are always these divisions, and the two should cross over more. And you can hear in Offenbach's music the influence he had on the American musical. You really can, and
Oh, absolutely.
even more so with Gilbert and Sullivan. The Gershwins were huge GNS fans, and you can
Yes.
hear it in their early shows. In fact, I don't know if you know this story, Danny, but there's a lovely story of apocryphal story of them pacing up and down the foyer on one of their first nights, one of their early musicals, and these two guys ran in late, dressed to the nines in toppers and tails. And as they disappeared into the auditorium, George turned to Ira and he said, "It's GNS, come to fix the show."
Oh God.
And I can believe there's a lot of truth in that because, deceptively so, there was this huge influence. So I think it's a shame that there isn't, that we don't see more of these pieces of different styles of piece in major houses.
I think it has to do with, I mean, I did The Merry Widow to reopen Sydney Opera House. I was
Glorious.
Opera Australia, and I was very young to do Hannah. But when I opened up a score, I completely fell in love with the story. And I didn't really realize how other people view The Merry Widow, even though I've seen The Merry Widow in other opera houses in America. But it always had this sort of kind of frothy comedy take to it. And while I find The Merry Widow frothy and comedic, at the heart of it is a rather genuine story.
Absolutely.
And I think in a way, I think maybe it's a mistake that people make with operettas. They think it's light opera, so they make light of the story.
Yes,
so
you cannot do that. You cannot do that.
Yeah, I really disagree with that assessment. And I think that, I mean, one of the things I loved about The Widow was that, threading through this very, very intense love story, yes, through some really fabulous frothy numbers. And, I remember thinking, you come for the can, you come for the froth, and you come for the bubbles and the champagne and everything, but you stay for the love story.
Yes.
And I think it requires that kind of authentic engagement, and it comes back also to respecting the piece as a genuine piece of theater, and not looking at it as a light piece of theater.
Yes.
As it's certainly not dinner theater, but if it's treated that way, it will come off that way.
Well, this is, yes.
So you get these rather kind of like bum 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 kind of operetta, like ho ho ho. You get that kind of slapsticky comedy that, one can do comedy and even be slapstick, but without, it just depends on how you view the human spirit, because every character, even a funny character, is a fragile human character.
But the point,
someone who I worked with so much, Alessandro Corbelli, is like the ultimate comedian for me.
Yes.
Because he is not trying to be funny, but he is deeply funny because he's deeply human.
Yes. The poignancy in Widow is so sophisticated, and it's insulting to that score to look at it as, in some ways, a popular and inferior cousin to the opera world. And it always annoys me when, it's another of my hobby horses, that people think by calling something an opera that they elevate it in some way. Like, Leonard Bernstein's Nearest and Dearest, persuading him to do the recording of West Side Story with Kiri Takanawa and Jose Carreras. Lenny, you've written an opera. And, it's a great musical. And why does calling it an opera or Sweeney Todd or something like calling that an opera somehow elevate it? It doesn't. We should respect these pieces for their quality and their skill and sophistication. So I absolutely hear you on The Merry Widow. And even with Gilbert and Sullivan, the minute you start to send them up, you're lost. You have to respect the material.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Are there any other pieces in the realm of the musical, other roles and shows that you covet and would like to have a crack at some point, in addition to all your operatic repertoire?
Oh, yeah. I would love to do, I would love to look at My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
I would love to look at, actually people have been talking to me about things like The Bridges of Madison County, which is a wonderful musical. And I love Adam Guedel and his musicals. And all
Did you see Light in the Piazza?
I did. I was there on the premiere, and it was wonderful. I mean, I know the score really well, and I was just,
ravishing.
Trying not to sort of be too much of a fangirl with Adam Guedel. But no, it was great. And that kind of crossover between opera, or let's say cross-pollination, I guess, between opera, people who do opera and love musicals and do them well, and people who do musicals and end up doing an opera, like someone like Kelly O'Hara, who's done a bit of opera
Of
as well.
course.
There are people who do it legitimately and can manage both. It's just a handful, but it's wonderful that people like that exist, and like Renee Fleming as well, who can do both, and it's something that I wouldn't have done earlier, Edward, because of the risk that I would have alienated people from my classical background.
Of course.
It's a funny little thing.
It's
I don't know
easy
whether
to
it'd be
get
different now.
pigeonholed. It's easy to
Yeah.
get pigeonholed. It's so interesting you mentioned people like Kelly O'Hara, Audra McDonald, Laura Benanti.
Audrey, yes.
All these great Broadway stars are all legit voices. Isn't that interesting? That tells you something, doesn't it?
It does so much for the music, if I may say, just for, when you're approaching musical theater, things that require a little bit more of extension, because musical theater singers will be trained to kind of nasalize and almost sort of, it's not to make smaller, but their head voice production is very different from when you hear Audra sing in head voice, or you hear me sing in head voice. There's more openness to the sound because there's a sort of, I don't know, there's a different facility of extension or bridging the gap. I mean, I remember when I did Man of La Mancha, I was sent a link because someone went, Elaine Page just gave you the most amazing review on Radio 2, and I was like, what? I went and I had to listen to it because, I just thought, well, if Elaine Page said something about me, oh my goodness. And
she loves legit voices. She
mentioned, she went, no breaks in the voice. And, that's something that, we all strive to do. But I mean, you can't have any breaks in a classically trained voice.
No. Now that you're lady of the manor at Glyndebourne, I mean, gosh, you couldn't have seen that coming when you were doing Cleopatra, I guess. But now that you're there, I mean, it would be great if you could exert a little influence and try to get one or two of these classic shows taken as seriously as they need to be taken and put on the stage at Glyndebourne. I think they would go down a treat there. There are some classic shows that would, The Most Happy Fella, for example, is a show that I know John Wilson wants to do, is desperate to do. So there you are.
That's good, because I know a couple of other desperate people who want to do Most Happy Fella, because I've been chatting with them and they want me to do it, and so I might have to.
I mean, there's another role. There's another role that you could. Of the opera repertoire, Danny. Where do you see your voice going? I mean, what are you looking at down the road a few years' time? You've been very wise in choosing repertoire, if I may say so, that keeps that facility and lightness in your voice and agility in your voice. And that's very wise, because it's so tempting to go heavier and heavier, isn't it?
Absolutely. Although I think I kind of got all of those temptations out of the way at a younger age than most, because I started at the Met at 19. I had those kind of strange offers. I remember someone saying to me, Zeffirelli would love you for Aida,
and
I was sort of 22, and they were going, this would be perfect. And, I was, when I started out singing as a Mozart singer, I hadn't done Baroque music yet. So there was a certain kind of richness to my sound that people went, oh, I could hear her going in that direction. And then what I did in my 20s was I spent time braiding together my vocal technique, and I wouldn't say erring on the side of lightness, but finding the lightness in my sound. And Baroque music was great for that, and all of my vocal studies was great for that. And that allowed the sort of filo di voce, the sort of inner line of my sound, to be very lined up before I would allow things to expand around it in terms of timbre and color and all of that. So, I had those temptations early on, and I've always said to my management, and to any of my team around me that I want to have a long career. I don't want to sacrifice that for something along the way that might be a sort of quick
Sure.
glory moment.
Sure.
And of course, what's so scary is that we how many singers do we know who have had a sort of 5 or 6 year burst, and it sort of goes one way or another through just a few bad decisions.
Yeah.
And the wrong repertoire can just, derail a lot of hard work in a lot of really valiant singers' journeys. And I remember in 2011 I made a leap to bel canto. That was very, very frightening, because I was so nervous that if I messed anything up, that everyone would say, well, she should just stick to Mozart and Handel and, not kind of come into the big girl repertory. But that went very well. So, I want to continue doing bel canto. I want to continue with the Elisairs and Pasquales, and look at other Donizetti operas, because I really enjoy Donizetti.
Sure.
And, I did the Rossini, Barbiere, which I really liked doing. And, because I have a good middle to lower extension for a soprano, it means that, I can really enjoy singing something like Rosina for its values up into the extension, which we added a soprano aria for, which Enrique Mazzola wanted to add for me. But I can enjoy the deeper passages as well of that.
Yeah.
So I want to keep exploring that, and then move into some heavier Mozart things. Like I did my first Donna Elvira in 2017, and I absolutely love that role.
Oh.
I always have, actually.
Yes. Fabulous.
And I did my first Musetta a couple of years ago, and that was a real surprise success for me. I mean, I knew I was going to enjoy it, but it was just wonderful to find that the public really connected with what I did with the role. And it was great to work with Richard Jones for the first time.
Oh my goodness, yes. There's a talent.
I just adored working with him as well.
And I could see you as Musetta, my goodness. It's a natural. No, interesting, really interesting to hear you talk about all of this, because you obviously know your voice so well, which isn't necessarily the case, believe it or not, with some singers. And that always surprises me, because singing so much about feeling, isn't it, as well as hearing. And in fact, it's more about feeling than hearing.
I know, what a beast singing is, isn't it? I mean, sometimes I feel that I'm almost like too technically aware, because I do know other singers where, we all know this in the business, there are singers you go like, how do you sing like that? And they go, I don't know, I just think of it here. And they sort of point to some place on their nose, and, so there's good and there's bad with knowing too much or not knowing enough. I mean, if you just go with only feeling, it means that if things don't feel right, you cancel. So, there are singers who, like, if they wake up and they go, and it's not the way that they want it to be, they don't have enough skills to do any workarounds to be able to say, well, okay, today it feels like this, so I'm going to do these exercises. This will open this up. This will work these muscles. This will, there are always technical workarounds. I mean, it's why we have a technique. But, of course, if you're always knowing and thinking about technique, it means that as soon as you know that something doesn't work or you're not doing something correctly, you think, well, what does this mean now for my performance? What else, what does that mean? What's going to happen now? This passage has this particular maneuver, and so it's balancing, I guess.
Of course. And
both of those things.
And because you're such a complete stage performer, in every respect, everything interlocks, and that's rare. And I've always enjoyed that aspect of your work hugely.
To my detriment sometimes, Edward, because sometimes, I one of the things I can't do is like glaze over, like have you ever seen the ice skaters, and when they're coming up for a now
big jump,
quadruple axel or whatever, they sort of jump out of their routine, and you see them focus, and you see them go like, right, I've got to jump now, and they sort of stop the storytelling for a minute because they've got to do the acrobatic bit.
Do you know,
that's something I can't do.
I use that exact metaphor Years ago, I was a commentator on Cardiff Singer of the World, and there was a singer there, and in the moments before the top C of this particular aria, she disconnected completely to prepare herself technically for the top C. And I used that exact method. I said it was like preparing for the triple axel in an ice skater. Yeah. Isn't that weird? So we're we're on the same wavelength there. Absolutely. You can, and the note then ceases to be part of the phrase. It becomes a separate event. You know what I mean?
Which I find very difficult to do. I can't do that.
No,
so it means I've got to allow my technique to work somewhere in the background, like a sort of app that's running, you know, in the back somewhere. But at the forefront is like, once I put that connectivity through with the public and the storytelling aspect and the character, I just can't leave. I mean, on pain of death, I can't leave that. I can't pull that string back.
Now, the season that was to have been this year at Glyndebourne, are they shifting the Poulenc Dialogue of the Carmelites to next year? Or do you not know that yet?
I don't think that they are. I think that what Glyndebourne is going to do is try to find places to schedule these 3 new productions that they had planned for this year in the future, and I don't know that it will be next year. I think with next year, because it's around the corner.
It is too
probably
soon,
have
isn't
everything
it?
Contracted for next year, so it might be better to do next year as it is and try to fit them in other flexible moments where planning is still being done. But I know definitely that Glyndebourne would never sort of abandon ship, so they're not going to just say, well, we have to bend this season. So they will, endeavor.
Find a way
and it's so much moving around. I mean, I've watched Gus, over the summer, as he's had to go into these multiple Zoom meetings and millions of contingency plans, and plan A, plan B, plan X, plan Y, of how to make things work if there was a chance it could work, and then sort of abandoning that plan and making a new contingency plan. And one of the great things of this summer was doing the opera at Glyndebourne, and Glyndebourne really had a can-do attitude, and they said, if these are the parameters, let's do something within these parameters. And with a lot of hard work, from every department, they found ways to make it work, and for public to come and enjoy safely a musical experience. And I'll never forget finishing that premiere, and some of the audience members coming up to me and saying, thank you and everyone for this. I never thought I would hear live music again.
Well, people are desperately hungry for it. I am aching to hear your Blanche in the Poulenc opera, because what a great piece that is.
What a piece.
And so I just hope they find a way to bring that in. But you're so right. I'm doing the first live gigs I have done for 9 months, because I do a lot of conversation events now, live conversation events with people, and I'm doing 3 events at Chichester Festival Theatre in November.
Wonderful.
Socially distanced audience, and we're just praying that this thing doesn't completely, envelop us all again, and that these shows can go ahead.
Absolutely. Glyndebourne has similar plans. They're taking the market for love into the theatre. They're going to provide a completely safe and socially distanced environment for people to experience the opera again, because it's sold out so quickly in the summer. Yeah, and
people are hungry for live music. They really
absolutely
are. Yeah. Well, Danny, thank you so much for being with me today, and albeit remotely. And we look forward to all that you do, and I'm particularly keen to see 1 or 2 classic musical theatre pieces make the stage at Glyndebourne with Danielle de Niese. That would be great. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Edward. It's very nice to speak to you, and thanks for having me.